Good morning or good afternoon. Today we'll be recording a video on Quizzette 823. As always, please make sure you write your last name, comma, your first name, today's date, and your class color. Today I'll say that I am red. Number 1 says, this graph shows two linear equations of y equals negative 4x minus 1 and y equals 2x plus 5. I want to remind you guys that when you guys have an equation and it's in the form where it has y equals a number or a slope, x, plus b. B represents the y-intercept, if you remember correctly, and m represents the slope. If the slope is positive, you should have a line that looks like this. If the slope is positive, your line is going to look like a positive line. If you have a slope that's negative, your line is going to look like this. It's going to be in a decreasing, or it's like going to be in a descending angle. So if you look here, the blue line looks like it's positive, and that means that it's probably this equation right here, this one, y equals 2x plus 5. And the negative line, the red line, that matches this negative slope right here of y equals negative 4x minus 1. All right, so sorry for that noise. My lovely student Sergio walked in. So we have a slope that's negative, and it's indicated by the shape of the red line. And that's why I put that equation there. And then the slope of that's positive is that blue line, which I put the blue equation on top. Another way you can verify this, I'm doing a little bit of review, so just bear with me. So let's say I'm looking at this blue equation right here. The y-intercept is 0, 5, and the slope is 2 over 1. Remember, we found the slope and the y-intercept for these? All right, so that means if I wanted to graph it, I'd go to 0, 5, and I'd put a point right there. I put it in black. It's kind of hard to see, so I'll do it in yellow. So there it is, 0, 5. And the slope is up 2, right 1. Or I can go down 2, left 1. So let's try it. Down 2, left 1. Down 2, left 1. So do you see how every point is on that line? So that means this is indeed the line of that graph. And I just remembered and I just reviewed how to graph a line that's in the y equals mx plus b form. So let's try the other one. The other one we have y is equal to negative 4x minus 1. The y-intercept is 0, negative 1. And the slope is negative 4 over 1. So if something is negative, when you rise, that means you rise in the down direction. So you go down 4, right 1. Or you go up 4 and then negative 1. I'm going to do that in a different color. All right, so I'm going to follow the 0, negative 1. I'm going to go plot that first. And I'm going to do it in a different color. I'm going to do it in purple. So 0, negative 1 is right here. It's what I'm writing in purple. I just realized now that's hard to see, so I'm going to try to do it in orange or reddish. It's right there. And I'm going to go right 4. No, not right 4. Down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right 1. And there's my next point. And that point is actually on the line. Now I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go left 1. And I'm at another point right there. All right, so I just reviewed how to graph lines that have a positive slope, have a negative slope, how to graph a line in the y equals mx plus b form, and what your y-intercept is and what your slope is. Now, the whole point of this question is easy. After you graph two lines, you have to just tell me the point that it intersects at. That's it. So the point that this one intersects at is this highlighted point right here that I just highlighted in purple. That point is at negative 1, comma 3. That point of intersection is negative 1, comma 3. So both of those lines meet at one point and only one point, negative 1, comma 3. So if you're looking at Wednesday, they already graphed those lines. If you notice, those lines intersect at one point, right there. So you just have to write the coordinates of this point right here. That's it. Number 2. So it says determine the coordinates of each figure. This is a 6th grade exercise. And I'm not saying that to demean you. I'm saying that to remind you the importance of learning your 6th grade and your 7th grade material and how this relates to 8th grade. If you do not know how to read the point in Tuesday number 1, this is going to be the practice you need. So let's look at Tuesday number 2. So Tuesday number 2 says, determine the coordinates of each figure. The first figure is the lightning. So I'm going to locate the lightning, and the lightning is right here. I shaded it in purple. Lightning is at, my x value is written first, and then my y value is written second. So when I write a coordinate, it's x, comma, y. So this is 1, 2, 3, and this one is -1, -2, -3. Just reviewing how the Cartesian plane works. And then we have +1 for the y up here, +2 for the y, +3. And then if you go underneath the origin, which is right here, 0, 0, this is -1, -2, -3. If you don't remember the signs, remember this. If you have a point in this box right here, your x value is positive and your y value is positive. If you have an x and y value and it's over here, your x is negative and your y is positive. If you have a value over here, your x is negative and your y is negative. If you have a value in the 4th quadrant, this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, this is quadrant 3, this is quadrant 4. If you have a value in quadrant 4, that means that your x is positive and your y is negative. So a lot of you will get the right numbers, but you're going to mess up the signs. Make sure that you have the right sign with the right numbers when you're writing the coordinates. This is true in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and beyond. So let's look at the coordinates for the lightning. The coordinates for the lightning are going to be positive, and it's actually on the line, so you know that it's going to be 0. So we have 1, 0 for the lightning. For the music note is at, let's see where the music note is. The music note is right here in the 3rd quadrant. I just highlighted it in red. So that's going to be, I already know that it's going to, both of my values are going to be negative. So the music note is at -1, -3. The red X, try to find the coordinates of the red X before I do so that you can test if you understand what's going on. The X is right here in the 4th quadrant. That means that my X value is going to be positive and that my Y value is going to be negative. Right, now let's look at the numbers. So my X value, if you guys notice, there is a bold line in the center of each graph. I'm drawing it with my red line. That represents 5. Okay? There's another red line here. That represents 5. There's another red line here. That represents 5. And then there's another red line here. So if you're having trouble seeing the lines, if you understand where 5 is, you can just count the distance between the axis and the 5 mark. So if you look here, the X is right next to the 5 mark. So that means it's going to be 6. +6, comma, and this is the 10 line right here. It's 1 above the 10 line, so that means 9. Now the letter B is going to be here, and it's on the graph. So that means it's going to be 0, comma, -1. And then for Wednesday, number 3, it says determine the coordinates of each figure, and you're going to use the same figure. So for this one, draw an arrow. So for this question, you're going to use this graph. And then on the back, for Thursday, it's going to print the coordinate. And on Friday, you're going to have to use Thursday's same coordinate. It's kind of the same. So number 3 and number 4 say, solve the system by using substitution. I'm going to go through number 3 and number 4 fairly quickly because I lost track of time and we're at 10 minutes with the video, and YouTube does restrict the time limit on my videos. So if you need to rewatch this, it's totally acceptable. I'm going to go through it very quickly, and then in class, we're going to go over it after I'm done recording or after you're done watching it. So here, this is a system of equations. If it gives you 2 or more equations, that's considered a system of equations. The idea of substitution is you're going to plug in one of these equations, and I'm going to name the first one the first equation and the second one the second equation. You're going to plug in one of those equations into the other, solve for x or solve for y, depending on what you are solving for. And then once you have your x value or your y value, you're going to plug it into one of those 2 formulas to find the other value. So here it tells me y is equal to x minus 1. So I'm going to use this value, x minus 1, and I'm going to plug it in into the other equation everywhere I see y. So I have 2x minus 3y equals negative 1. That's my first equation. Now I'm going to use the second equation, and I'm going to plug that in right here. So that leaves me with 2x minus 3 times x minus 1, close parentheses, equals negative 1. And all I did, and I'm going to highlight it in purple, all I did was plug in the value for y that it told me right here. Y is equal to x minus 1, and that's what I put in, x minus 1. Now, I put parentheses because you have to distribute that negative 3 to both of those numbers on the inside. So negative 3 times x and negative 3 times negative 1. So negative 3 times x is negative 3x, and negative 3 times negative 1 is actually positive 1. Everything else stays the same, so it's still equal to negative 1, and I still have this 2x over here. Now, remember when you're solving not when you're solving systems of equations. When you're solving a 1 or 2 step equation or a multi-step equation, you use DC-MAM. You destroy or distribute. We distributed the number. There are no fractions, so I don't need to destroy a denominator. Then it's combine like terms. And here I see that I can combine 2x and negative 3x to negative 1x. And then everything else stays the same. Plus 1 equals negative 1. Done. Now I have to move the smaller variable, but I only have one variable, so I don't need to move anything. Now the next thing I have to do is add or subtract. And I see this negative 1x. I want it by itself on one side of the equation. So I'm going to move this positive 1 to the other side by doing the inverse operation. This cancels. It's a 0 pair. Negative 1, remember this is plus. Negative 1 plus negative 1 is negative 2. So now I'm left with negative 1x equals negative 2. I want to get rid of that negative 1. It's being multiplied, so the inverse operation is division. So I divide both sides by negative 1, and I'm left with x is equal to negative 2 divided by negative 1 is actually positive 2. So x is equal to 2. Perfect. Now I can use x is equal to 2 to find what y is. Now I'm going to use the second equation because it's the simpler one. So I'm going to do y equals x minus 1. I'm going to plug this in for the value of x to get y equals 2 minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So y is equal to 1. Now, the way we write our solution when we find the solution to a system of equations is we write it as a point. And remember, a point or a coordinate is x, comma, y. So in this case, we have x is 2, positive 2, and y is positive 1. So all of that to get this point right here. Now I'm going to do the same thing on number 4, but I'm going to do it very quickly because I'm running out of time. So this time I'm going to use the first equation into the second equation. So I'm going to plug in y equals negative 2x minus 4. I'm going to plug in this equation here. So here I have x plus 5 equals negative 2x minus 4. I am going to move the smaller variable. This cancels. I have negative 4 on this side. And then x plus 2x is 3x, and then I still have that plus 5. I'm going to move that. I'm going to undo addition or subtraction. This cancels. I'm left with 3x is equal to negative 9. I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and I end up getting x is equal to negative 3. Now I'm going to plug in x is equal to negative 3 into the simpler equation, which is y is equal to x plus 5. I know that x is going to be negative 3, so it's y equals negative 3 plus 5. A negative 3 plus a 5, that's a positive 2, so y is equal to positive 2. And as always, the coordinate is going to be negative 3, comma 2. That's my answer.